Welcome to the Totum Podcast. My name is Tim Irvine. I'm here with Dr. Stacy Irvine, and we are happy to be back and talking to you about an excellent subject, which is alcohol and redefining our relationship with it, and some other hard things as well. As always, we're coming to you from our live gym here at King and Spadina in Toronto. So if you hear some banging or noise, it's because people are working out. We're happy to have Grace Lindsey back, who is a wellness and performance coach here at Totum, a personal trainer as well, and had lots of experience with helping people deal with tough things and helping their habits to reform and those sorts of things. And Grace, obviously we're talking about alcohol and adjusting our relationship with it. We know some facts here that alcohol is unhealthy physically. For some people, it feels like a poison, and if you drink enough of it, you know why. There's so many societal issues that come along with it. However, it is linked directly with fun and good times, and it's part of our social connections. So going out for drinks or dinner, there's almost always alcohol involved. So a huge part of the population actually partakes in it, but I feel like now we're starting to think a little bit differently about it. And us being in the health and wellness business, I think the question is, what do we do to help people?
Who wants to start?
I'll give my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of 2, the recommendations that just came out that were 2 drinks a week, which made me cry, and tons of our clients. I had people coming in saying, you know, I've spent my lifetime building this ginormous wine cellar, and I've imported wines from all over the world, and what am I supposed to do? And all my socializing revolves around alcohol. How am I supposed to manage that now? Lots of business people, deals are done, you know, over a bottle of wine and a dinner. And so there's a big readjustment happening there. I know for Tim and myself, our lives, you know, definitely our social lives revolved around events that had alcohol included, absolutely. And I think the pandemic made it so much worse. And I even think too, I look at, we have a 19-year-old, and thankfully he is busy school, busy with training. But if he didn't have that training, I'm not sure that his life also, the social at university, would not involve a lot of alcohol. I bet it really would. And I know it involves some, and it makes me think, like, if these habits are starting young, and I feel like maybe you've experienced that a bit with those habits starting at a young age, it's kind of like, where do you go from there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think they start from a young age, and I think there's a lot that goes with someone's relationship with alcohol. You know, it's their upbringing, it's their friendship group, it's their environment, it's their job. You know, alcohol is, yes, it is fun, it is pleasure, but it's also a stress release for a lot of people. And I think that's where the conversation of, you know, we don't want to sit here and say that don't drink, right? That's not realistic. But how can we open the conversation of moderation? How can we open the conversation of drinking in a healthy and balanced way, which I think is a lot easier for some people than others. You know, I think that alcohol can be, you know, it's a complex relationship for some. Mm-hmm. And so I think we can offer as much as possible today, but I think it's worth noting that some, you know, take it with a pinch of salt, because some of this will be more challenging to navigate for other people, for some people.
And I think that's a good point, because we're not really talking about people that have alcoholism as a disease. We're talking about people who socially use it more than they want to, mm-hmm. and they're struggling to figure out how to do less, or they meet with somebody at our place and they kind of click in that, okay, well, I should dial it back a little bit, but I don't really know how to do that, and I don't want to give it up entirely, but I want to lose some weight and I want to sleep better and these sorts of things. I got to make a change. So have you worked with clients where that's been one of the focus points, is to reduce alcohol intake?
Yes, I have. And I think the first thing that I would look at with a client that brought that to the table would actually be the environment that they're in. because I think alcohol is often, well, having a drink is triggered usually by an environment, right? So that could be going for drinks after work. That could be meeting your best friend for a glass of wine. That could be, you know, for me, my mum lives in the States, having a FaceTime and having a glass of wine, you know? It's like it's almost like a ritual. So looking at your environment and, you know, what do you need to potentially, I don't want to say eliminate, but potentially have a look at of where you are placing yourself. Because when it comes to cutting down on something, there are societal, especially with alcohol, the societal pressures that go along with it. And it's like the one thing that when you choose not to do it, you get looked at like the weird one, right? Which is crazy.
Or like party killer, right?
Exactly.
Because everyone else really wants to party and you're saying, no, I'm just going to have this. And then they look at you kind of like, really? Like,
exactly.
Come on, we invited you here to have a good time. And I think you kind of made a really good point with, for some people, we've heard the term social lubricant, that they get into an environment, like maybe it's, you know, we're in the Christmas season, so maybe it's your Christmas party for work, and that in itself makes you nervous.
Totally.
Because you're talking to people that you work for, or you're talking to people that aren't your family and aren't your close friends. And so maybe for some people, that's a strategy, is like, okay, I'll get there, I'll have a couple glasses of wine, then I'm going to relax, and then I can have a good time. And I feel like I've heard this conversation over and over again for many years. And I think the main thing too that I think the three of us really recognize is that alcohol is not good for you. And that's an important variable, in that years ago, there used to be things saying, oh, you know, you could have 1 glass of red wine a day. And I almost look at it similar to smoking. Many years ago, smoking used to, you know, they would advertise that it was okay. And then we learned that no, it's not okay. And some people still love to smoke and enjoy it, and that's fine. But we know that it's not okay. And I think that the big change we're seeing is we now 100% know that alcohol is not okay. And I still have...
From a health perspective.
Yeah, from a health perspective. I still have people coming and saying, you know, my grandmother's 95. She has scotch every night. And I say, okay, like, great for her. But we still know the physiological effects. And I think it's going to take a little bit of convincing and more conversations like this where we all say, like, yes, the evidence is there. Maybe some people can get away with more than 2 drinks a week. And we also have the social positivity that we need to be together. So I think that's why it's really interesting to break down, you know, what are the strategies that we can actually use.
I think it's also important to remind ourselves that the ritual of that alcohol brings us has actually got nothing to do with the alcohol content. It's not to do with the alcohol. I've had periods of my life where I've gone completely sober, or when I'm cutting down, whatever it is, or drinking less. And actually, it's not about not having a drink in your hand. You should still have a drink in your hand, because it's part of that cheers, you know, it's part of, you want to feel part of the thing, the event, the celebration. But you don't actually have to have alcohol in it to still feel part of it. And that's something that I learned on my journey. And I think something that is important, well, something that I talk about with clients too, is that you can still feel part of it. It's not to do with the alcohol. It's to do with the ritual.
Yeah. And we've talked about that. So if I can share my experience, in university, the only time that I drank was to party, right? So going out with friends, party, and no other social drinking. Like I didn't have a beer watching a football game or anything like that. And then at some time in my work life, it was get home on a Friday, have some drinks. We didn't even have kids. And then this ritual developed. Reward, total
de-stress.
reward.
Totally.
Which is, I think, a big part of alcohol use. Is to get reward. Same thing with food, right?
Like, my day's over. You hear many moms also a glass of wine at the end of the day. You know, the joke is like, is it 5 o'clock? Can I have a glass of wine yet? And that is definitely stress relief. It's not necessarily about the alcohol, but the ritual of, okay, my day's like ending.
So now where I'm at is I don't consume alcohol Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I do Friday, Saturday, and sometimes on Sunday. If there's a social event or something like that where alcohol is present, I don't put any restrictions on myself. So these are sort of loose guidelines, but I wanted to do that because I think at some point I was like, you know, maybe having a beer or something 6 days a week. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. Not that it was controlling me. It was just like, I need to put some boundaries on myself that I feel comfortable with. And to the point where I drop our son off at, whether it's a hockey game or a hockey practice, and you know, a bunch of other dads are having beer, and they say, well, do you want a beer? I say, well, no, it's Monday. That's ridiculous. Why would you have a beer on Monday? That's nuts. Which I know I'm just joking.
They all make fun of us now at the arena. They're like, oh, don't talk to them. It's Monday. They're not going to have drinks with us.
See, that's a good example, though, of the
pressure.
Yeah, and yes, that was said in jest, but it is, you will be commented on if you choose not to drink. Something I often say to, anyone that's trying to cut down as well, is when you experience those comments and that judgment, you have to remember that it's usually says more about them than it does about you. You know, it's usually like choosing to cut down on alcohol or sobriety, whatever it is, it kind of shines a mirror in some people's faces, because a lot of people aren't brave enough to make that choice. And I think it is a brave decision to try and cut down on alcohol.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of looking at it, actually, is that you shouldn't feel bad about it when you're doing it in those situations.
Well, it's all difficult things, like changing your habits around difficult things in general. And I was listening to a podcast recently, and there was this talk about habit change, and that changing the same habit can be dramatically more or less difficult for someone depending on their circumstance. So the example was somebody deciding to do more yoga. So regular yoga. Okay, so if your friend group or your family or whatever, they already do different types of physical activity, and maybe some of them do yoga, and so it's really easy to not, there's no criticism about it, there's cheering for you to do it, versus somebody else who may live in a household or have friend group that are completely inactive and criticizing you for going and doing this sort of thing. So I found that interesting too, and definitely alcohol feeds into that, because you go meet your friends at the bar and you have a soda and lime, and it's like, what, you're always going to get a comment.
Totally.
Are you pregnant?
Yeah, for women.
I get that. No, I get that a lot.
Do you?
Actually,
they ask you if you're pregnant. Yeah.
You're glowing, Tim. Something's different.
I don't want to talk about it right now. But.
Love it. Okay, so one strategy is to keep the ritual, put something in the glass, and we do that. Like it's a big thing for me that at the end of the day, I have a drink that I enjoy. So on the weekdays, it's sparkling water that I've mixed with something, but I do have to prepare that. Like I have to get the things that I like to go in it early in the week when I'm getting groceries. I don't want to forget about it, because I want it to be something special at the end of the day that doesn't have alcohol. So that's an amazing strategy. Another thing that we have used is that we stop drinking early, because the one thing we didn't touch on is sleep. Alcohol really wreaks havoc with your sleep. And having gone through menopause already and having my sleep messed up from that, if you add alcohol to menopause, then it's like, forget it. You might as well just binge movies all night. You are going to have the worst sleep ever, because it really tends to bring on a lot of those effects. And so what we've tried to do is that we'll do something on a weekend, but we'll say like, okay, let's start at 5 and we'll meet with friends and do something that's maybe a little bit more active, maybe something outside, and we'll have, a couple drinks, but shut it down by 9, knowing that we're going to sleep at, say, 11. So we're still going to have a good sleep, and we're not going to blow away like a whole Saturday or a Sunday because we're hungover. And that's been pretty effective for us, because all we've had to do is kind of shift things ahead. And thankfully, our friend group is also trying to not drink as much as they used to. I think it's just the generation that we're in. Have you tried anything like that, or?
Well, I think what you touched on there is valuing the next day more than necessarily staying up all night drinking. I read a book when I was going through redefining my relationship with alcohol that talked about, there was a quote in it that talked about alcohol being a tomorrow stealer. And I remember feeling like statement. It resonated so much.
Yeah.
And so I think actually thinking about what the benefits are going to be of you not drinking as much, you can attach more pleasure to that than the discomfort of cutting down the alcohol that night. But you have to, I think, getting clear on what's on the other side of cutting down alcohol? What is it costing me if I actually drink too much tonight? It's costing you your weekend.
100%.
I remember thinking that when I was like in my early 20s and a big drinker and a big partier, that if I was out on a Friday night, I couldn't plan anything for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah.
It would steal days from me.
Yeah.
And now I value my time so much more that it's a no-brainer. I'm like, but why would I do that on a Friday? Because I want to live tomorrow and I want to feel good.
Tomorrow stealer. That's a really
great
that's
comment.
a good statement.
Yeah. The one thing that I have found, and I mentioned this to you, Stacy, I don't know if you've seen this, Grace, it's an app called Sunnyside, which is these two guys from the States who created this app. And one of them, who's a CEO, wanted to redefine his relationship with alcohol. His parents were both alcoholics, recovering, completely sober, no alcohol intake. He didn't want that, but he didn't want what he had, which was what you just described, lots of partying, lost days, those sorts of things. So he created this app which helps people not quit drinking, although I think that if you want that, I think it helps with that as well. But it helps people just reduce stuff, like a little external accountability around what success is for them, which I feel like when you're trying to make these hard changes, getting somebody to help you or something, in this case an app, is really important. Would you agree with that?
Totally. And I think that a little bit touches on environment as well and your support network, because having people that support what you're doing is really, really important, especially your nearest and dearest. Because like if you were in a relationship with someone that didn't support you cutting down on something like that, that would be very challenging.
It would be incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
In your case, so I feel like you kind of went from one extreme to the other. Did you lose friends? What happened? How did you navigate that?
I mean, I feel like I'm a unique case because I moved countries in order to do it.
Right. Okay. Well, still, that's a strategy.
Which is extreme, and it's not the only reason why I left England. But I knew that I couldn't make the changes I needed to make in the environment that I was in, which is why I know how important environment is.
I didn't even know you were English.
No?
No.
Crazy. I just talk a bit weird.
That's so impressive. Right. So I think too, some of when we're working with our clients, it's some of that actual real recognition, which is what you did.
Awareness.
So not lying to yourself or saying, the next day it's going to get better, or I know that I can change that, to say, no, I've tried many different ways. This is what keeps happening, and this is what I really need to do. And sometimes it's drastic, and sometimes it might not be that drastic, but that actual recognition. And that's what, when we first heard this data, and I was almost crying because I was like, how do we possibly get to 2 drinks a week? Which we are nowhere near that yet. I'm
really near it.
No, you're not. We're still strategizing. When he said occasional Sundays I have a drink, I'm like, not occasional.
He makes up Monday to Friday, Thursday through Sunday, or Friday through Sunday.
Yeah. So
which is a danger too. Is like
binge.
Yeah. Now it's time to go because it's my day.
Totally.
Which you don't want to do either. And
I think we did that for a while, and now we're like settling in. But I have to say, I think for us, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the tomorrow stealer and the sleep is just too important. And because we used to even love coming home from a party and we'd go have drinks and like kind of debrief on the party. And that was a ritual for us that we enjoyed until we woke up the next day with like our heads screaming and having to drive the kids places, and it was painful. And then we just said, oh my God, we have to stop doing that, because those end of the night drinks are also like, they're the awful drinks, right? They're usually the dark alcohol or the stuff that's filled with sugar that's so bad for you and destroys your sleep. Sleep destroyer could be another name for alcohol, really.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting.
So a question for the two of you. Obviously, we've got young kids, but I think that this, I'm curious about people who are maybe in their mid-20s and younger. I feel like it's probably more acceptable or more understandable if somebody's not drinking. I just have a feeling, I think about what
you're right.
The whole dry grad, we certainly didn't have that when we were graduating from high school, but that became a big thing, so less emphasis on alcohol. So I'm curious if you guys think that that's happening now too, that a younger generation doesn't put the same level of reward or enjoyment.
I think there's just so much more awareness now.
Yeah,
we
agree.
have so much more access to information. I mean, the good and the bad. But I think that it really is so much more awareness. And I actually think not even early 20s. I think it's just becoming cooler and more trendy to live a more sober life.
Yes,
it actually is. It's less of a thing when you go out now and someone says that I don't drink. I feel like it's so much more common than it used to be.
I completely agree. So our guys are teenagers, and I know even with patients and the athletes that I've treated, I'm surprised that quite a few of them, I even have some patients in their 20s that tell me that they just don't drink. And I'm always very impressed by that, because I can't fathom how they've managed to work that into their busy lives, but that's great. Whereas when we were doing sports and we were athletes, I didn't drink while I was training, but I specifically remember that at the end of your season was a huge party. Everybody binge drank, you'd be out like at hotels, places, like it was mayhem. And I also think during those times, a lot of stuff went really bad. And now I think the universities are saying, like, we cannot endorse that at all. And I think the same thing happens at graduation. Our graduations were a gong show. Kids puking everywhere. It was a total gong show. And I think that's exactly why the school system also said, we can't be liable for that. And I think that it's a much better environment and more conversation. Because I think that mental health, addiction is a part of their language that it was not really a part of ours. I'm sure that probably a third of the people we grew up with had alcoholism in their family, and nobody said a word about it. And now I think it's wonderful that we're talking about it.
I agree. My just to share something on that, my youngest sister is in her early 20s, and she doesn't drink at all.
Wow.
And for some other reasons. However, when I've talked about it with her, I truly believe that her being able to do that at her age is a superpower.
Agreed.
And I actually think, like, even where I feel proud to be at now with alcohol, that I actually don't do what you do I don't drink Monday to Friday. I let myself have a glass of wine when I want to have a glass of wine, because then I don't want to have the whole bottle of wine. Which, if you had have asked me 4 years ago if I thought I'd ever get here, I wouldn't have believed you, but that works for me now. But I think being able to drink less is truly a superpower, and it ties into the doing hard things. When you do something that's hard for the first time, it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
And then you do it again, and then it's a little bit less uncomfortable, and then you do it again, and then it just becomes something that you can do, and I truly believe it then becomes your superpower. To not feel forced to do something because everybody else is doing it, for you to confidently value tomorrow over tonight, all of those things. I think like what you mentioned before, this needs to be looked at as something that it's a brave choice, and it's something that is admirable. You shouldn't feel ashamed because you're cutting down your alcohol intake. It's actually, it's a great thing.
Yes.
You know?
I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. One other thing that I think you could be sitting at a party, and I know this has happened to us before, where if we're bored, we'll drink more. Because we'll kind of be like, oh, this party's lame. And it'll be way more fun if we're drunk. And I think that that's where those conversations that you're talking about, a much better strategy would be, let's find a way to make the party fun. Let's go talk to someone interesting, or let's go meet a new person. Pushing, so you're not passive, you're actively saying, okay, I'm not having the best time, my time is valuable to me, how can I make this better? And one thing, we had a party, it was for our birthdays.
30th birthday just a couple of months ago.
Looking good.
Yeah,
Our
thanks.
30th birthday, yeah. And we decided to do games, and it was so much fun, and everybody drank less. But we also laughed our heads off because the games were, you know, I think we were playing, it was like simple games, charades, name game.
Yeah.
And just the fact that you're up and jumping around and moving around, and that kind of changed the whole dynamic of the party. And the next day I got a bunch of texts from my friends that were there saying, I can't remember when I laughed that hard. And that was so much fun, and we need to do that more. And we had made kind of a conscious decision to say, you know, this will mean, because we of course had a busy day the next day, I said, this will mean we won't drink as much. We started early, we'll try to get people out like by 11, and we played these really active games, and everyone had a blast and felt good after. And I think that can be a great strategy.
Definitely.
As opposed to just passively being like, oh, I'll just drink more, I'll just get another drink. And
If I don't think I'm going to enjoy something unless I drink, I won't go.
Oh, that's
Wow.
a good
I
one.
know.
That's a great
I know I won't
connection.
go. Yeah.
Because you're not really looking forward to it, and so you're like, well, I'm going to have to drink there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you can't enjoy it sober,
Yes.
then you should probably have a look at, should you be going?
Yeah, that's a good one. One last strategy piece for me, and I heard this from James Clear, who's the habit guru, wrote Atomic Habits, and he talked about these people that have this seemingly iron will to not do something. And he said that he doesn't believe that at all. He said that he thinks that those individuals have created an environment where it makes it really easy to make good decisions or avoid bad decisions. So if you want to if you don't want to drink beer as much, don't have beer in your house. Right? So then it's not an option. You don't want to eat cookies, don't have cookies in your house. Like, these are all like obvious things, but we don't necessarily do them. So, you know, we're talking always about resolutions and those sorts of things. It doesn't have to be January, but if we're thinking about, okay, I'm going to stop doing something, then set yourself up for success. Or on the converse, you want to start doing something, you know, make sure that it's super easy for you to do it, which I thought it's just such a smart way of looking at it. Yeah.
Sometimes we drive to places, events, because then we
I do
know
that too.
we're driving, so we are very limited and we have to drink early right when we get there and then stop.
Yeah.
And when Stacy says we, she means me.
No, but I drove to the Totum party
Oh,
on
did you?
Friday.
There you go.
I did exactly that. I brought really lovely champagne, and I knew I would enjoy it, but I just had a little bit right when I got there, left it there for everyone else, and then just drank water for the rest of the night, so I was good to drive home.
There you go.
And I totally enjoyed myself, and I enjoyed my champagne that I had. That was really nice. But I didn't feel like I had to I couldn't keep going. But I personally need those hard barriers. I do.
But that's awareness. It's knowing that you need that.
Yeah, I guess.
Right.
That back to what I said about James. Like, you actually put something in place.
Yes.
I know this works for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to do that. So this is the way I can manage it.
Yeah.
Smart.
Well, it's interesting. An interesting, you know, way that we try to work these things, right?
Well, I think it's knowing, though, what's going to work for you, which I think is part of the first challenge. Is like, you might try a few things and they don't work.
Right.
You know? And I think just trial and error. If you set yourself a task and it doesn't work, then you probably need to revisit the strategy, right?
Great. Yeah, that's a very good point. And don't give up, because you just rework it.
Exactly.
And don't be hard on yourself. This is hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
It's really
hard. It's really hard.
Our society has really, I think part of this too, it's the same as food, in that we should always be aware of these marketing campaigns and how sophisticated they are. We just went to an event not too long ago, and what was the alcohol company that was like, we don't have to say the name, but like really beautiful things. Here, have a glass. And it was towards the end of the night, and of course I had a glass, and she was like, that was stupid. I'm like, I know, but delicious. But that's the sophisticated marketing. And I'd already had wine at dinner, so my brain wasn't working properly to say, I shouldn't do that, I should go find some water somewhere, when someone's handing that to you. But all of these marketing campaigns, similar to food and similar to things and ways they want to control us, we have to realize that that's the goal. The goal is to get us to feel that we need alcohol to have fun. They show pictures of these amazing parties in amazing locations, and everyone's dancing and everyone's having fun, and it's like the alcohol is front and center. And it's, being logical to say, I don't need that to have that kind of fun. I can have that kind of fun with my friends. I don't have to have that brand of alcohol to have that fun. But it's hard.
I mean, they do that in movies too. Look how like sophisticated they make alcohol look, or like they romanticize it and they make it, and it paints this picture that like pouring yourself a glass of whiskey when you're in the bath is like totally normal and feels great. You're like, God, that bath looks good. I guess I should do that.
Who has whiskey in the bathtub?
They do in the movies.
Yes.
I'm telling you.
Yes, I can picture it.
Cold plunge and whiskey.
Yeah, that won't go together very well.
No, definitely not.
No.
Well, I think we could talk for a really long time about this, but I think we've sort of uncovered some strategies that people can look at implementing if they want to reformat their relationship with alcohol. And certainly we all know that it's better for our health, our cognitive abilities. Like, everything gets better when we're putting better things into our body. So it's in everyone's individual best interest to do that. But as we said, this is a hard topic to adjust, and as are many others, but there's some strategies for all of those within this. So thanks for joining us again, Grace.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we're better together with this. We'll get,
absolutely.
we'll make more progress the more we talk about it.
Definitely.
The more like the two little statements you said, like, I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, like, tomorrow. I need like
Tomorrow's
a great tomorrow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's really good to avoid drinking too. Dancing.